Preseason's over. We're done. We're almost time for the regular season, almost time for week one. Hopefully your fantasy drafts are going strong, and I'm sure a lot of you are drafting this week. I'm Jamie Eisenberg. That's Heath Cummings. That's Dave Richards. Fantasy Football Today. As you can see, there is no Adam Azer. He is currently enjoying his last day of freedom before the regular season locks in, and he is tied to his chair. They do not let him up. We do not let him leave. His wife just feeds him food in the chair that you see with the draft board behind him and all the same background that he's had for the last 10 years. So Adam's going to get locked in and ready to go, but he's enjoying his one last day of freedom. Gentlemen, how was your weekend? Did you guys have any drafts this weekend?
I had none because a lot of leagues I'm in don't like to draft until right before the season starts. So they get all their information in. It's not wrong. You just plan it whenever you can plan it. But I start my serious drafting this week.
I am in that state where I am just constantly have this anxiety that I'm supposed to be making a draft pick. I think I only have one draft going on right now. I had one on Sunday. I had one on Saturday. My FFT Open draft just finished. Yeah. There's drafts going on everywhere.
Yes. We have our podcast draft tonight. I have another league that's drafting at the same time. I have.
I didn't know we had our podcast draft tonight.
Yes, we do. 8 p.m. Eastern for those of you that are participating. Thank you so much. And we will keep you updated on where we're at with our draftathon draftathon to raise money for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. He's going to give us an update on that. He had a great time in Memphis with, what is it called? The Creators League?
Creators League.
We'll get an update on that. We'll get an update on why Thomas Schaefer is the greatest Vikings fan ever, especially when it comes to his fantasy leagues. And we will catch you up on all the news and notes you need to know, things that we noticed from the preseason, things I noticed from the preseason that the guys will react to. I'm sure they notice the same thing because they're smart. And we'll give you some risers and fallers. We have 3 risers, 3 fallers from all of us guys, ranging from Keon Coleman for Dave, Evan Ingram for Heath. I'm excited to hear about that one. Devon Achane's a faller for Heath. We'll talk about some news and notes regarding that. Dave's faller is Tyreek Hill, so we hate the Dolphins apparently. And we'll catch you up on everything you need to know to get ready for your draft. So let's get into it with the news and notes, guys. A couple of things coming out of San Francisco this weekend. San Francisco Standard reporting that Jauan Jennings could open the season on injured reserve. That's kind of speculating that it could be a standoff from his contract in regards to what his agent is looking for, as the calf situation is also part of this as well. But then there was also a report from Adam Schefter, which was basically quoting Kyle Shanahan, saying that Jennings expects to be ready for week 1. So we know Ricky Pearsall's been flying up draft boards. I've seen him go as high as around 6 in the majority of leagues at this point. Brandon Ayuk is expected to open the season on the PUP list. But Dave, just give me your take on the 49ers wide receivers right now with Pearsall, Jennings, Ayuk. We know that Demarcus Robinson is going to be suspended for 3 games. Russell Gage is out. You know, they've been trying a bunch of different guys. So they trade for Sky Moore. Just how do we expect this passing game to look for San Francisco in week 1?
I think it's going to be a lot of Pearsall and a lot of Kittle and a lot of McCaffrey. And then whenever Jauan Jennings decides to play again, or whenever his health allows him to play again, he'll round himself into game shape and he'll be a good contributor. Same thing with Brandon Ayuk, but there's uncertainty with that. We don't know when they're going to be available. And therefore Jennings, for me, I wouldn't take until after pick 100. Ayuk would go later than that. This is not the situation that I would think that Kyle Shanahan is excited about. It's just the hand he's been dealt. But luckily, I think it does play into Ricky Pearsall potentially getting off to a really big start and carrying it through the entire season and basically cementing himself as the number 1 wide receiver. He's healthy. Hamstring issues haven't been a factor for the last several weeks. We know he's explosive. We know he's a great route runner. We know that he's got his timing down with Brock Purdy. There's a lot to be excited about. And we know that George Kittle is going to do his thing. So if he's got those 2 guys and McCaffrey's healthy, the offensive line has to be healthy. I know that Pooney, their guard, looks like he's going to miss some time. It's starting to feel a little bit like last year that there's so many injuries on this 49ers team. But overall, I think there's a real great chance for the targets to get funneled to Pearsall, Kittle, McCaffrey, just as how fantasy managers kind of want it right now.
And this is just reading between the tea leaves, so I'm not saying this is necessarily what's happening, but those 2 reports made me think that this is like a Jonathan Taylor situation from a couple years ago.
Yep.
Where if we can't get the contract figured out, then he might start the year on IR. And so I guess that gives me a little more hope that if they do, maybe Jauan Jennings is fine, and we don't have to worry about a re-injury early in the year. So I think you have to draft Jennings with that risk that this thing could cause him to miss the start of the year, but also factor in, like, if once you get to the double-digit rounds, there's nobody that doesn't have risk. A lot of these guys may not do much in the first half of the year, and Jennings still has a lot of upside. So I agree with most of what Dave said. It's just that if we find out tomorrow that Jauan Jennings has gotten a raise, then I'm not sure the funnel is quite as pronounced.
I just wonder if we're going to get you mentioned Jonathan Taylor, these guys that have had these hold out situations, just again, small sample size. The last 2 years have not been good unless your name is Jamar Chase. And, that situation's on, I think, a different level, different playing field. In the case of the two running backs in 2023, Jacobs' worst season or second worst season of his career, Taylor worst season of his career. So, you just hope that these guys are good to go, ready to play. I do think, though, just the fact that where he's falling now in drafts, it feels like it's an easy player to take, because if he does play at some point this season, which is going to be the case, then he's going to still have a lot of upside based on his role and everything around him. Again, he may be playing at the same time Ayuk is playing if he does go on IR. We just don't know how long this could potentially play out. But I don't know if this is necessarily a buy the dip situation. I also don't think you want to just all of a sudden say it's Ricky Pearsall and only like this isn't the Steelers, like it's DK Metcalf and nobody else. There's guys coming back at some point during the season. To what level and what expectation you have for them, that's a different story. But I do think, as Dave said, Ricky Pearsall's got a shot to get off to a great start, and we'll see how long that continues. But it's a great opportunity for him. So it's understandable why he's moving up the draft board so quickly. The 49ers also made a trade last week, as we're well aware. They traded for Brian Robinson Jr. Isaac Guerendo got a little bit banged up in their preseason game with his shoulder, so we don't know if there's anything to keep an eye on there. But the biggest thing really is Kyle Shanahan coming out after the game on Saturday and saying, quote, "We brought him here to be our number 2 back." So, Dave, last week you did say following the trade that you thought it would still be maybe Guerendo. This is pretty clear now. It's Brian Robinson.
100%. And I think that I wonder if it's more because of injury than anything else for Guerendo, and they're just not sure where he's at right now. I feel like there's some uncertainty there, but this is a coaching staff that really liked Brian Robinson when he came out, apparently, and they had the opportunity to get him. They jumped at it, and now they've got a physical running back to use as I guess, like a complementary part of their offense if they want to use him a few times a game. I can't imagine that Brian Robinson's going to take McCaffrey off the field at the goal line or even on like 3rd and 1 at midfield. And he's certainly not going to play on passing down situations. So I think it's just about adding quality depth to the position they've been decimated by because of injury this preseason.
I also think, and this might sound weird, but Brian Robinson Jr. might have more upside in this role than he had in the Washington role.
Yeah.
Just because in Washington, he was always going to share rush attempts with Jaden Daniels and Austin Ekeler, and Austin Ekeler was going to do most of the work in the passing down. If McCaffrey goes down, Brian Robinson Jr. might just be close to a feature back in this offense. And we know what that looks like no matter what your name is. We can go down the long list of guys who were not as highly drafted or highly regarded as Brian Robinson Jr., who had great performances in the San Francisco backfield. So that's both, I think, exciting now that you can get Brian Robinson in the double-digit rounds, and why I'm still a little bit lower, it seems like, on everybody else on Jacory, Croskey-Merritt, just because I think he's going, if he just gets everything week 1, he's going into that Brian Robinson Jr. role. He's not going to have the chance to have the full breakout role.
We'll talk about the Commanders' backfield in a second when we get to the things that we saw in the preseason, or in the case of JCM, we did not see in the preseason, and we'll tell you why that could matter. I think, though, if you drafted already and you drafted Guerendo, you might want to hold him just for a week just to see what happens, if his shoulder's okay, and how the depth chart sort of plays itself out, maybe even a few weeks into the season, unless you have to make a move. But clearly, if you're looking at it, Robinson now kind of slides into that Guerendo spot on draft boards, where you're taking him as a high-end handcuff and, potential lottery ticket in case McCaffrey, who only played 4 games last year, suffers an injury. Mike McDaniel says that Devon Achane has had, quote, no setbacks and should practice prior to week 1. We know that Jalen Wright's dealing with a leg injury. We don't know how long he's going to be out. And Ollie Gordon, very similar to Little Bill, is another guy that's flying up draft boards as well. So give me your take on the Dolphins backfield now. I know, as we're going to get to, one of your followers is Devon Achane, so we'll kind of double back a little bit later. But in the case of Achane right now, do you feel comfortable and confident in still drafting him in the first 2 rounds? Or how you sort of taking this whole calf injury that he didn't play in the final preseason game, and we still don't know when he's going to be back on the practice field?
Yeah, I talked about it last week. I moved him down early in the week, and we can talk more about where to, but I'm still comfortable with him in round 2. I still think what we're hearing right now is that they think he's going to be okay for week 1. Calf injuries can be a little bit scary, can be re-aggravated. The big news here is that it seems like Ollie Gordon pretty clearly passed Jalen Wright as the number 2, and he seems like a better fit than Wright for the Raheem Mostert role that it has been in this offense. He can be the hammer. He may be the guy who leads the Dolphins in rushing touchdowns, although he probably won't lead the league like Mostert did. I definitely have Gordon ahead of Jalen right now. I wouldn't want to get too carried away, just because if we're right and Achane's okay, it's not like Ollie Gordon's going to be someone who probably turns into a starter. He might be a flex. And if something happens to Achane, I think the passing down work that we're so excited about from him probably goes to Jalen Wright and not to Ollie Gordon.
But Dave, in terms of just the 2 guys that we talked about, Brian Robinson as a handcuff to McCaffrey and now Gordon as the handcuff to Achane, who do you want more?
I want Gordon more because I think Gordon might have a sustainable role all season long. Not necessarily, like to Heath's point, I don't think he'll be any better than like a bye week flex, something like that, when Achane's healthy. But I think it's fair to question just how healthy Achane will be over the course of the year. I asked McDaniel about that last week. He said that he wants to use multiple running backs. He called that an ultimate weapon against the defense. I think Gordon does a lot of good things for the Dolphins. He's physical. He can run the zone. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. We saw that in the preseason game. I saw that in the practices that I saw. I think he's a decent back. And so when I look at Gordon, if I can get him, I'm looking for him in the double-digit rounds like everybody else. But if I had to take him in late round 9, like there really wasn't any other running back I liked better, okay, fine, I'll take him. Plus, there's the off chance that Achane, maybe they take their time with him. Maybe they really want to make sure that calf is okay. Those injuries are always tricky. Everybody who had Christian McCaffrey last year remembers how tricky calf injuries are. So I think that there's definitely a possibility that Gordon opens the season week 1 against Indianapolis as the lead running back for the Dolphins. Drafting somebody like that in round 10, I think it's a fine plan. I don't have a problem with it at all.
A couple other running back news items just to keep an eye on. Chargers general manager Jay Horwitz, am I saying that right, Dave?
Joe Hortiz
said that Najee Harris can potentially play in week 1. So just keep that in mind with Omarion Hampton. We'll talk about Hampton a little bit later, but Najee Harris may be able to get on the field for week 1. So we'll see how much that impacts the Chargers backfield. ESPN reports that Jaden Blue suffered an ankle injury, but just a low ankle sprain against Atlanta in the final preseason game for the Cowboys. Heath, have you changed your opinion on Blue and Javonte Williams based on maybe how preseason unfolded and with the ankle injury?
I think that Javonte Williams is going to open the season as the starter. I hope my tone reflects my enthusiasm. I don't really think that Jaden Blue is going to be a feature back in the NFL, even if he's healthy. I think he's a great change of pace back potentially. But the problem is that like his best skill set's probably working on passing downs. And the only thing Javonte Williams did good last year was pass protection. So I think it's kind of a tough fit right now. I'm not sure if I've drafted a Cowboys running back, and I'm just kind of hopeful they trade for Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, I mean, there's still potential for them to add somebody to this, and we'll see what happens with their final 53-man roster because Phil Maffa, their 7th-round draft pick, is on the bubble right now. So we'll see if they want to keep him. That could be telling what they think of Blue and his injury. But right now it looks, or even Miles Sanders. I mean, he's also on the roster bubble as well. But it does look like, as Heath said, Javonte Williams is the number 1 running back for the Cowboys going into the season. Probably somebody you want to take as a low-end flex as opposed to a high-end flex, but a good bench piece for you maybe at the start of the season. As Adam alluded to last week, look, Rico Dowdle, probably not the most impressive running back, but did get you some quality production as the year went on. So if the Cowboys offensive line is okay, someone will do some damage in this backfield, and maybe Javonte Williams can do some work in the passing game. All right, last news item before we take a break, and I forgot to mention, and I will mention it multiple times again, we are presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. We appreciate all of their support. So Thomas Schaefer, we know, is a Vikings fan. And the Vikings over the weekend made some shuffling with their backup quarterback. They bring in Carson Wentz, and they trade Sam Howell to the Eagles. And we're in a dynasty league. Heath, myself, Adam Azer, several other members of our staff, the Bake Burger Dynasty League, including Thomas Schaefer. waivers ran over the weekend, and Thomas, Mr. Vikings himself. So Thomas, why don't you show the text exchange that Adam and I had and sent to you today? So this is Adam texting me. Did Thomas just make the worst bid in the history of dynasty leagues? And I questioned it. I didn't know what he's talking about. And he said, Thomas spent $38 for Carson Wentz. It's a super flex league. $38 for Carson Wentz in the Big Burger League. I said, no way, $38. And Nazer said that nobody else even bid. So I said, did Thomas think that came with a Vikings jersey? And Adam said, or Vikings tickets. So Thomas, Mr. Viking, Mr. Carson Wentz, $38 of your budget?
Well, you got to give a little bit of context on this.
What context could there possibly be?
I've lost 4 games in this league. The FFT members to only beat me was Jamie once, have an 11-1 record against the FFT members. Quarterback situation is not great with my team. Carson Wentz would probably be a top 20 quarterback if he starts for the Vikings. So that's what we got. If you want me to pull up my team, it's loaded.
No, your team is great.
It might be more fun to pull up Adam's team.
I'm sure
that's my opinion. Like, if Carson Wentz starts with the Vikings, he'll probably be a top 20 fantasy quarterback. And in a super flex league, he'd probably go for more money than $38 mid-season. So
yeah, I'm sure you've got a $500 budget. So spending $38 out of $500,
it's $100.
Yeah, he's out.
Oh.
He's done.
Oh.
Thomas does have one of the best teams in the league. Adam absolutely has one of the worst teams in the league.
Yes, Thomas and I will be trading for Joe Flacco at some point during the season. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back and get into some of the things that I noticed from the preseason that the guys will also react to, and then our risers and followers. That's next year on Fantasy Football Today.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, welcome back to the show. I'm going to give you some things that I saw from the preseason that the guys will react to, just a few games and a few things that kind of stood out to me. If you guys have anything else to add that I missed, feel free when we're done with this conversation. And again, we are brought to you by BetMGM. All right, Bears-Chiefs. This was probably the most fun preseason game because both teams played their starters for just more than a couple of series. And we have a couple questions that I have here in regard to what I saw. So do we have a Luther Burden problem, Heath? He continues to play behind Olamide Zaccheaus, and he may be the slot receiver for the Bears to open week 1. I don't care long-term, but short-term, should we have a worry that maybe Zaccheaus is going to be a factor and impact Burden and maybe impact DJ Moore and Rome Odunze as well? No, Odunze looked really good in this game also.
If Luther Burden was flying up draft boards like Emeka Egbuka and Matthew Golden, then I think we would have a Luther Burden problem. Thankfully, this has kept him under the radar, pretty much always available in round 10 or later, unless I draft him in round 9. And as we've talked about, there have been at least a handful, maybe more, of wide receivers who have begun the season not producing as rookies, and in the second half of the season been one of the best wide receivers in the league. I still think he has that potential upside. I love the fact that he's still so cheap. But just to answer the question more fully, you shouldn't draft Luther Burden thinking you're going to start him week 1 or probably for the first month.
I feel like there's always one roster spot that we could afford to give to a player who we're willing to be super patient on. It could be Jauan Jennings. It could be Chris Godwin. You know what I'm talking about? Guys that, like, they're going to do nothing to begin the year. And your hope is that you're not going to need that roster spot. And you really believe in this player's talent coming back to help you in the second half of the season, maybe by Halloween. You get it. I think Burden is one of those guys, and his average draft position, he's free. I mean, he's after around 12, so you can get him whenever you want. When I saw him at the joint practice against Buffalo, he looked good, but he played a lot with the 2s. He wasn't with the 1s. This has been a consistent thing. I'm sure the Bears are going to take their time with Luther Burden, but once he does get that opportunity, we're all going to be very excited to go and get him. So maybe you've got deep rosters. You've got a bench spot. You've got 7-8 bench spots. Absolutely give one to Luther Burden and hope that he breaks out in the second half of the year.
Yep, could be a little bit of a time situation, but so much upside if he's a slot receiver for Ben Johnson, which is hopefully going to be the case.
So that Bears offensive line is going to be their biggest problem. I mean, and again, I saw it at the Bears joint practice. You guys all saw it against Kansas City. Yes, the Chiefs played their starters on defense for, I mean, portions of the starting defense for like the entire second half. But I mean, Chris Jones was out there for a few drives as well. This could be what actually holds back everybody in Chicago. I don't think Caleb was miserable at quarterback. And Jamie, you said it. Rome Odunze did look great. He's looked great all summer long. But I'm very concerned that even with all the additions that this Bears team made along the offensive line, they're not gonna pull together and be a strong unit whatsoever. And it's gonna result in sacks, drives stalling out, penalties, etc. I don't think it's particularly good for DeAndre Swift, especially on inside runs. It's troubling to me, and I think it's something that everybody who drafts a Bears player should think about at least a little bit before they actually do it.
All right, well, let's go to DeAndre Swift here. And Heath, you could just smile your way through this. I'll ask Dave to start because he's been poo-pooing DeAndre Swift, and he did once again here. So DeAndre Swift, does he even have any competition at this point? Because he played 20 of 21 offensive snaps on the first 3 drives. Roschon Johnson, hurt. Kyle Monangai, hurt. Travis Homer, hurt. I mean, we could be looking at a huge workload for DeAndre Swift. So, Dave, despite the potential offensive line concerns, because there's a lot of running backs that are getting drafted ahead of DeAndre Swift that have awesome offensive line concerns, whether they're bad, one player injured, the case may be. Swift may just be one of the top 5 guys in touches.
And you absolutely have to remember one of my favorite sayings in fantasy, which is opportunity over talent. And this is to Heath's credit and to Heath's point. If DeAndre Swift is going to get this huge opportunity to begin the year as like playing 80% of the snaps for the Bears offense, of course he's going to fall into production. It doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. And just because he gets all that work doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to have huge numbers. I actually don't love his matchup week 1 against Minnesota as an example. And I think after that, what do they have after that? It's Detroit, it's Dallas, it's Vegas, and then it's their bye. Ooh, maybe week 6 is when Luther Burden can have that breakout. Anyway, I would cautiously draft him as a low-end RB2. I think that his ADP is a little bit higher than that. I know Heath is much more bullish, but there is an opportunity there until proven otherwise that DeAndre Swift is going to be the lead back for Chicago. I think he's going to catch a bunch of passes, and I think that's going to help him out too.
Yeah, man, you would talk about nobody stepping up. But I expected, even when I was excited about DeAndre Swift, there'd be somebody else that had a big role. And it's just because of injuries and because I think also like the guys he's competing with are not in the same stratosphere in terms of talent as DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift has flaws. His vision's been bad at times. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying he's the perfect running back, but he's so much better than everybody else on this roster. And once again, for like the 18th time, maybe more this offseason, they had a chance to trade almost nothing to add a guy that seems like would be the perfect fit in Brian Robinson Jr. Pass.
No, you know why? They pass because Bieniemy is their running backs coach, and Robinson and Bieniemy had a falling out in Washington, apparently. So that was never going to happen. But there are going to be cuts. Look, I can't name a running back that the Bears could sign off the street or off of somebody else's cuts that would be a big threat to DeAndre Swift right now. It would have to be a trade. It would have to be a big trade, and I don't think they're doing that.
As I say, Tank Bigsby's the one guy that's been rumored to maybe be traded that could come in and take the early down work that would give me a little bit of concern. What?
Or Swift. I mean, excuse me, or Etienne. He's also there was a report that both guys could be potential trade.
I'd be surprised if the Jaguars moved on from Etienne unless they got a really good offer.
I think based on what they're looking at, they would be comfortable with any one of their top 4 running backs as potential tandem committee there. So
any 2 of, yeah.
So if they go with Bigsby and Tootin.
Right.
Well, okay.
The thing that helps Etienne is that his skill set, like I think LaQuint Allen's probably the closest to his skill set in terms of pass catching.
And they love him.
Right. Tootin and Bigsby are not going to move into the Travis Etienne role.
Right. I think, again, like they're comfortable at this point with, to Dave's point, like probably want more for Etienne than they do for Bigsby. But the difference would be is that Etienne's contract is more and Bigsby is still relatively cheap if they wanted to hold on to him for next year. But we'll discuss that if that happens.
Well, hold on. Wait. I asked Liam Cohen exactly about this last week. And he said that they've got a problem of figuring out which 3 of the 4 running backs they're going to dress each week. And I think a solution is to trade one of them. I thought ETN is like their best all-around running back. They're
No question.
definitely not going to trade Tootin. They're definitely not going to trade LaQuinn Allen. They had Allen in as a pass protector a bunch. So I think they like what he can do as a pass protector. So that kind of leaves out Bigsby. And I know that I was very excited about Bigsby at one point this offseason. Maybe I will be again, but it might be because they trade.
Get him to Dallas.
Yeah. Oh,
Get him to Dallas.
Oh. You know what? I would be thrilled with that. Put him in Dallas. Pair him with Javonte Williams. Let Jaden Blue take his time to get ready. And then you've got DeAndre Swift as a solo act in Chicago until further notice.
I still think we're going to see a Devin Singletary, Khalil Herbert, one of these guys. I'm not saying Chicago, but these guys are going to get potentially shipped somewhere, maybe cut. We could see a situation where there's going to be somebody that impacts the backfield. By no means, I think, ruins the backfield, barring a trade, but someone will get released on Tuesday and could be somewhat of a factor. One of those backfields does not appear to be Washington, and so Jacory Croskey-Merritt did not play in the game against Baltimore. Chris Rodriguez did play in the game against Baltimore. Heath, you sort of alluded to where you're at on JCM, Little Bill. Just give us your take because you weren't on the show with us last week following the trade. How do you feel about Jacory Croskey-Merritt, Austin Ekeler, Chris Rodriguez, and again, looking at one guy not playing in the final preseason game, maybe getting the starter treatment, and the other guy in terms of Rodriguez being out there?
So one thing I was unclear on, and again, we've talked about this a little bit, but I was in Memphis for 3 days and there was very little downtime in those 3 days. And I unfortunately didn't have a lot of Wi-Fi on planes. I won't speak about that anymore. But was Croskey, is there any sort of being dinged up that had to do with Croskey-Merritt not playing, or was it just because he was protected with the starters? My expectation right now is that Austin Ekeler is going to play his role and maybe have a slightly larger role than he had last year. Jacory Croskey-Merritt and Chris Rodriguez are going to split up the early downs and short yardage work, with I would expect Croskey-Merritt gaining more touches as the season goes on and being more valuable than Chris Rodriguez. If I have 2 or 3 really good running backs, and I'm just looking for the upside guy, Croskey-Merritt, I think, has the most upside of this backfield. If I'm in a 0 RB situation in a PPR league or a hero RB situation, or if I'm looking for someone who I think will be a good flex regularly, I think Austin Ekeler is the better pick, and he is the Commanders running back I would draft first, and he's pretty much at this point never getting drafted after Croskey-Merritt, so I think he's also the best value.
I think you could take both guys in that round 8-9 range, depending on who you like first. I'm going to take the rookie first just because I think there is more upside than maybe even what Brian Robinson showed, which is why they made this move. They feel comfortable enough with him. I did run a poll on X with about 5,000 votes. Who would you rather have? Which rookie would you rather have right now? Jacory Croskey-Merritt or Caleb Johnson? And it was a 50-50 split.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I'd still rather have Caleb.
I would too.
I would actually rather have Little Bill just because I think there's an easier path to him having production in his rookie season, just based on what appears to be the case in Pittsburgh. We talked about that on Friday based on the Thursday night game, where it seems like Caleb Johnson behind Jalen Warren and behind Kenneth Gainwell. I don't really buy the Gainwell stuff, but I just don't think we're going to see a lot of work on passing downs for Caleb Johnson. And in case of Ekeler, look, he missed time last year. He only had 77 carries for the season. So I think Jacory Croskey-Merritt could have a chance to run away with this job, but that's just me. We'll talk about that a little bit more as the week goes on. I want to just get to a couple of topics when we get to our risers and followers. So Dave, I know everybody's not necessarily rushing to handcuff Ashton Jeanty, but has Zamir White now moved ahead of Raheem Mostert if you are looking for a late round flyer to maybe back up the rookie running back there who could get a lot of work if Jeanty were to miss time?
Well, do we know about an injury to Mostert?
I haven't seen anything reported, so maybe that's the case.
Did he just get the veteran treatment in their third preseason game?
There was an article I read, and I can't remember who wrote it. I'm sorry, but that said that Zamir had just passed Mostert, and they thought Mostert was just getting cut.
Okay. Well, then it makes sense for Zamir White to play. I thought Zamir White looked okay. He's never been a dominant running back as far as talent goes. He's always been an okay talent. There was once upon a time the year when we thought that he was going to be great. Was it last year? It feels like it was 3 years ago, but
it was prior to last year.
Okay, where we really were excited about Zamir White, and we were taking him with a top 60 pick or something, and then he absolutely collapsed. He is the type of physical back that Pete Carroll tends to gravitate toward, but he's nowhere in the stratosphere of Ashton Jeanty. If you're in a deep league and you want to have that backup, if you draft Jeanty with the top 15 pick, I suppose it is Zamir White right now. That would be that guy. And that leads to another interesting question. If Raheem Mostert gets cut, does he go back to Miami? Does he go to Chicago? Does he go to Dallas? And would we be interested in him? And if that's the case, is he worth taking with your last pick in a draft this week on the chance that he ends up in a more favorable situation? And if he doesn't, then he's an easy cut even before week 1.
I think he maybe goes to Cancun.
It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, 33 years old, but is still 2 years removed from leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns. So We'll see if he still has. He's kind of a young 33 in terms of mileage because he missed so much time due to injury in the early part of his career. So maybe he could be a contributor on some backfield, but this was a little surprising to see Zamir White move ahead of Raheem Mostert because felt like Mostert was kind of locked into that number 2 role, but we'll see how this plays out probably after Tuesday afternoon. Heath, when we look at the Browns backfield, we know Quinshon Judkins still not signed by Cleveland. Second round pick, had the domestic violence arrest and charges were dismissed, if I'm explaining that correctly. But in terms of his roster position, he is still not with the Cleveland Browns. So they had their preseason game against the Rams. And Dylan Sampson was the starter. First time that Jerome Ford played in the preseason, but Sampson started. They rotated basically on a 50-50 split. Give me your take on the Browns backfield right now. For anybody drafting, who are you drafting first of the Browns running backs? Dylan Sampson, Jerome Ford, or Quinshon Judkins? And rank those guys.
I would rank them Sampson, then Judkins, and I have both those guys in round 10, and then Jerome Ford later. We liked Sampson quite a bit, talked about him a lot on FFT Dynasty in April before the NFL draft. Jacob Gibbs was a huge fan of his and has 7 million videos of him running in college and the preseason and probably high school and middle school also. And he's a good running back who can do some things in the passing game. Jerome Ford will be involved. It's not going to be a feature running back situation. Listen, I asked, I think it was 10 days ago on Twitter, at what point do we get concerned about Quinshon Judkins not signing a contract? This was like 4 or 5 days after the charges had been dropped. He's not signed, and there's not been a lot of reporting that he's close to being signed. And they're playing real football in less than 2 weeks. I'm not going to draft him first amongst the Browns running backs. There is a possibility he gets signed in the next few days, and then I will. There's also a possibility that 10 days from now, Quinshon Judkins is still not signed by the Cleveland Browns, and Dylan Sampson is the best value at running back in fantasy football drafts.
Everything's up in the air with this group. I love the theory of drafting Quinshon Judkins and waiting, but to Heath's point, it's going to be, if he signs today, August 25th, well, 2 weeks from now is effectively less than 2 weeks until week 1. So he would need 2 more weeks on top of that to really get an understanding of what he's being asked to do in the offense. I don't know if they've handed him a playbook. He hasn't signed a contract yet. I don't think they would do that. And so at the absolute earliest, and this is if he signs today, we're talking about him contributing by week 4, week 5. We don't know how good he'll be at that point, but I think he's the type of talent that would be effective for the Browns by the time we get to Halloween. And so if you draft Quinshon Judkins, it's with the idea that you're going to be patient and you're going to wait so long. But you could say, I'm not patient. I want somebody that's going to help me now, and be whiny like that. And Dylan Sampson would be the guy to go and draft instead, who I thought his speed was so evident in just a few seconds. He only played 5 snaps with Flacco, but when he had the ball, he looked really good, except for the one play when the offensive line couldn't make any space for him. So I kind of like the idea of getting Sampson if you need a running back now. And if you can't get your hands on Sampson and you still need a running back now, Ford's the guy. But if you can afford to be patient, Quinshon Judkins would be the one to get. As of now, I have Judkins ranked the highest of the 3, but they're all not too far from each other.
I have Ford still the highest ranked. They're back-to-back. I dropped Ford after the preseason game because I thought maybe he had the opportunity to be the clear-cut starter, and maybe Sampson working in and then seeing what would happen with Judkins. I just wonder, like, when they're in obvious passing situations, are they going to trust Dylan Sampson to pass protect for a 40-year-old quarterback, and maybe Ford gets those opportunities
they don't have to
right away. So that's why I give Ford a slight bump, but I think the upside certainly favors Sampson. And, look, this backfield, as much as we've seen a decline since the week 2 injury for Nick Chubb in 2023, Ford's had some good moments. Adam has the numbers. I remember it, but most
Bunch
60-yard
of
runs.
60-yard runs, I think.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, I made the comment about a competent offense at the beginning of the year. Like, what if Dylan Sampson gets to be the lead running back for 6 games with Joe Flacco, and then Quinshon Judkins finally gets up to speed and he's the lead running back with Dylan Gabriel?
Yeah.
Can't rule that out.
Yeah, or Kenny Pickett, or even Shadur Sanders. You never know. But yes, Dylan Gabriel might be the backup there. Big conversation going on in Cleveland. Who's going to be the number 2 quarterback? I want to get through a couple more things before we get to our risers and fallers. So let's move a little quicker on these. Dave, Nick Chubb did not play. Dameon Pierce got the start. Who's the running back you're looking at as the Joe Mixon replacement if he's going to miss the start of the season?
Do I have to pick one?
Well, deeper league. We're talking about Jerome Ford.
Yeah, I have Chubb after 100th overall. We've talked about a bunch of running backs that I'd rather have than Nick Chubb at this point. But I think he'll probably be the lead guy. It might be a narrow lead that he has, but he'll probably begin the year sharing with Dameon Pierce. And Woody Marks is effectively undraftable. But maybe somebody who steps up by the middle of the season. It's a mess. And we can apply the same type of logic that we use for Quinshon Judkins toward Joe Mixon. He hasn't practiced since May, and we don't know when he's coming back. And they could easily keep him on the injury list.
He at least has a contract, but
right. Right. So like that's a plus. He probably knows what he would be doing out there on the field if he had to get out there, but we don't know when he's going to play. We don't know how effective he'll be. It's a very messy situation. But to answer your question, Jamie, it's Chubb, but it's with minimal conviction.
I would draft Sampson, Judkins, Ollie Gordon, Tootin, all the Jags, Brian Robinson Jr. before I would draft Nick Chubb personally.
I thought you were going to say Joe Mixon at first.
I would definitely draft Joe Mixon before Chubb too.
Is anybody excited to draft Mixon at this point?
When am I doing?
Jacory, Croskey-Merritt, or Joe Mixon? Who are you drafting?
I have Mixon higher right now, but I kind of get it.
I'm fine with Mixon in round 8.
Yeah, late round 8.
It just feels like this could be a big time headache. And
it could be, but it also
look, we're gonna find out in the next 10 days at least if he's gonna open the season on the PUP list. So that could, certainly change how drafts go. Round 8 might be the earliest you're considering him, and it might fall to round 10 or 12 depending on if he's gonna miss the first 6 weeks of the season. I want to get to the Broncos Saints game because there were some interesting things that happened there. Chris Olave played the majority of his snaps in the slot, and we know the quarterback situation is going to be messy there, but some easier throws might be a better situation for him. Does that change your interest or appeal in Chris Olave at all, Heath?
I'm not moving him, and I really haven't drafted him, but I do think that it gives him a better chance of being a startable fantasy wide receiver.
I do think that if he stays healthy, he has the ability, not to the same heights, so don't think it's going to be top 3 in terms of points per game, but he has the ability to be this year's Chris Godwin, just a guy that we're dismissing almost completely to a certain extent. Like you said, round 7, you're not moving him. The quarterback situation is a mess. He's had a hard time with the concussions. If he plays a full season, like his talent is too good, despite the poor quarterback play, and he could just dominate targets. So I think he's a good number 3 receiver to draft. I don't want to even say target him, but I do think that he could have a chance if he stays healthy to really outperform his average draft position. If we're looking for a number 2 running back behind Alvin Kamara, Dave, is it now Kendre Miller and it's not close?
I think so. And I think they talked about that after the game, that Kendre Miller is going to be who their number 2 is. So when I draft Kamara, I'm not actively trying to handcuff him to Kendre Miller. Let's not lose sight of the fact that Kendre Miller really has not had a great start to his career. Injuries have been a major factor. I think if I draft Kamara, I'm looking for a different running back to be on my bench instead of somebody on the Saints.
Yeah, not a bad best ball kind of late flyer, when you're talking about round 15, 16, just to see if Kamara is 30 years old, missed 3 games last year with a groin injury. So hopefully the run offense will be better. And to your point, Heath, Kellen Moore doesn't throw to his running backs a lot. So maybe there's a role for Kamara that's a little different and a role for Kendre Miller or somebody else. Could be Devin Neal, could be Cam Akers. We'll see who ends up making the final roster there. But Kendre Miller's role, especially, Dave said injuries. no Dennis Allen anymore, the guy who hated him. So, maybe an opportunity for Kendrick Miller to prove himself in the NFL for the first time. Other side of the ball, RJ Harvey just appears like he's locked into the first and second down role for now. So he's played 34 of 40 first and second down snaps with the starters in the preseason, but none on 11 third down snaps. So Heath, give me your take on Harvey and JK Dobbins and how you're approaching the Broncos backfield.
Harvey's been a riser for me, but probably slower than everyone else, it seems like. I like RJ Harvey as a top 24 running back. I've still got him, though, in round 5. Dobbins, I think, has a chance to be a value because it seems like nobody's that interested in him, but I'm not drafting JK Dobbins before round 9. So it's still clearly Harvey over Dobbins, and Harvey has gone up a little bit for me, but I think maybe we don't make too much over the limited use of JK Dobbins in the preseason, because why would you want to expose that guy to too many hits with his injury history? And he's a vet that what he does well.
I think the one thing that's encouraging for this offense in particular, we know Sean Payton can get production out of 2 running backs. He's shown that before. And in the case of Harvey, just because he's not playing on third downs does not limit his ability to catch passes. They will throw to their running backs on first and second down, and he could still be a 40-plus catch guy. What do you have him projected for in terms of receptions? Take your time to pull it up. But Harvey, I do like the fact that they're telling him, hey, bounce it to the outside if it's available to you, because we trust your speed and your ability to make plays. He showed that he can get, skinny and make a nice touchdown run inside the red zone. So there's a lot to like about his game. And if he can be a significant pass catcher, to what level, we'll find out. But there's also that potential of Dobbins misses time every year.
Yep.
And he could be top 10 in those games. What do you have projected for you?
46, which is one more than I have for Ashton Jeanty. Still significantly behind Trevion Henderson amongst the running backs, but 46 catches for Harvey.
The rookie running backs, yeah. So It's going to be fun to see what they do. Dave, just one last question on the Broncos. Cortland Sutton looked awesome.
He did.
Feels like he's dialed in with Bo Nix. But the second receiver, there's some questions. They trade Devon Vele to the Saints, and Troy Franklin's had a good preseason. Pat Bryant's a rookie that they like. Marvin Mims, though, he feels like he just doesn't we don't talk about him enough, I don't think. And he's played every snap with Bo Nix on the field so far in the preseason. He has not done anything with it. So production versus usage is a lot of things, some people look at and say, okay, he's on the field doing a lot of things, but he's not producing. Where are you on Marvin Mims? Because he feels like he's one of the best sleepers that's going on. Not discussed enough. I mean, there's obviously people talking about it, but not discussed enough. Certainly not by us.
I agree. Though I worry about target volume for him and how often he's going to get 6+ targets per game. I feel like he's going to be under that number most weeks, and that's what keeps me from moving him into, let's say, round 12, round 11. So if it's after that, I have no problem with taking a guy that's got huge explosiveness to his game. We saw him get used as a short area weapon last year, as well as a deep ball guy. Caught a huge game-winning or game-extending touchdown, I believe it was, against Cincinnati late last season. He's a quality. He's got quality speed for sure. I worry about Sutton and Ingram, and now the run game is going to be better. Just how much is going to be left for Mims for consistent fantasy production? If you're in a deep league that starts 2 or 3 flex spots on top of 3 wide receivers, maybe Mims could be one of those flex spots. Otherwise, at best ball too, he's going to be great. But otherwise, I think he belongs on the bench in fantasy. He's worth taking, probably around 150th overall. I can't get much more excited than that, unfortunately.
So Heath or Thomas, do me a favor, pull up the question there about Marvin Mims or Rashid Shaheed. I was just going to ask that question because they feel very similar in terms of what their roles are going to be, what their participation is going to be. One's got a good quarterback, one doesn't. Heath, who are you taking, Marvin Mims or Rashid Shaheed?
It's definitely Rashid Shaheed for me, and maybe I'm being too influenced by what happened last year at the start of the year. I had sent this tweet out a couple weeks ago, but Rashid Shaheed's last 17 games with the Saints looks very similar to Jaden Reed's last 17 games with the Packers. He gets a little bit of work in the running game. He has been remarkably efficient. And last year, when he and Olave were on the field together, their target share was relatively similar. So, and that's part of what holds Olave down for me as well. So it is a much better quarterback situation on the Broncos. But when we get to my risers, we'll see why I maybe haven't given Mims as much of a target boost from the Vele trade as some people have.
I totally agree. Shaheed should be drafted first, but I would not be surprised if it's close or Mims is better. And you're getting Mims at a better discount. Just again, quarterback situation much better. And now he's going to play hopefully all the time, and that could open up what we saw at the end of last season. Dave was alluded to it: 13 targets in his last 2 regular season games, 4 touchdowns in those 2 outings. So he finally got an opportunity to play, and he played at a very high level. All right, we're going to take our last break now. When we come back and get into the risers and fallers, tell you why Dave is even more in love with Tyler Warren, and Heath is maybe coming around on Evan Ingram. That's next on FFT.
Hi. Novocaine? Novocaine!
Novocaine is now streaming on Paramount Plus.
You're gonna love this.
Oh, you're strong! It's wildly entertaining and an absolute blast.
I'm in.
Novocaine, rated R, now streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, time for our risers and fallers. This is for the entire preseason, not just coming off of the 3rd preseason game, and hopefully can help you with some of your drafts this week, guys that we're, I think, more excited to draft, and maybe some guys that we're looking to avoid a little bit. So let's start with the risers here. Dave's 3 risers are Omarion Hampton, Keon Coleman, and Tyler Warren. Heath's 3 risers: Evan Ingram, Trevion Henderson, and Tedero McMillan. And my 3 risers are Isaiah Pacheco, Mike Evans, and Matthew Golden. So Dave, let's start with your 3 guys: Hampton, Coleman, and Warren. When are you drafting them, and just your outlook on these 3 players?
Hampton is creeping into late round 2 for me. And I think that's something that you alluded to last week, Jamie, maybe a little bit before that he was getting up there for you as well. It's just thinking about running backs with huge upside. There's a lot of them this year. Is he that far off from Bucky Irving and Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams? A lot of people are nervous about Najee Harris, and we were nervous about Najee Harris before July 4th. And then once we learned about the July 4th incident where Najee's vision was impacted, and the fact that Najee's just now starting to get back to practicing for the Chargers, I think Hampton's already shown the coaching staff what he can do. They will use Najee or another running back in tandem with Hampton, but I don't think it's going to be 50-50. I think it could be a lot closer to 65-35, and that's the percentage that we look for from any running back. I think he's got a chance to really be an absolute stud for a Chargers offense. Yeah, they lost their left tackle. That absolutely sucks, but they still want to run the football. They will do what they can to run the football, and Hampton is the one who's best to do it. So I'm willing to take that little bit of risk and take Omarion Hampton ahead of James Cook, ahead of Ladd McConkey, ahead of any quarterback. To me, he's kind of earned it based on what we've seen and read, and we know that the talent's really good out for him in LA.
Heath, how concerned are you about, though, the role in the passing game?
I am concerned because in this Greg Roman offense, we don't generally see running backs used in the passing game very often. And I think that there, as Dave said, there's going to be some sort of committee. I'm not sure what the Chargers offensive line situation is really going to be like. They've already had a big loss there. And so I've moved Hampton up for sure. I just, again, kind of like Harvey, haven't moved him up as fast as everybody else. I think the only rookie I'm ahead on is the one we're going to talk about in just a minute. I think he's a good number 2 running back. He certainly has the upside to be what Dave's talking about and finish as a top 12 guy. But in full PPR, I think there's enough concern to keep him out of that range for me.
So critique me. Am I drafting him too close to his ceiling?
I think you're drafting him too close to his ceiling if Najee is healthy and playing a significant role. I think if Najee is going to miss time, like when I said that after the report from The Athletic that he may start on the NFI. And I said, if that's the case, he's going to miss the first 4 games or 3 games, whatever the case may be, then I thought you're going to see him get drafted in round 2. I have him early round 3, so I'm not far off from what you're talking about.
Sure.
With the expectation now of Najee starting at some point early in the season, but he missed the entirety of training camp. You know, all we've seen of him is walking and occasionally jogging around the field. So there's still concern about what his role will be. I'm not worried about the other guys. Yes, they'll give some work to the other players there, and Kamani Vidal make a cut. You know, not that he's a factor, but Hassan Haskins and those guys, like, it's not a concern to me based on what Hampton could do. And they are one of the luckiest teams that they could just take their all-pro right tackle, put him at left tackle, and still have a semblance of a very solid offensive line. You know, the Lions may be the only other team that could do that with the same sort of continuity and even better. But I think just in the case of drafting him close to his ceiling, yeah. I mean, if there's concern, it's no role in the passing game, you know, or no significant role in the passing game. You know, we're talking about JK Dobbins on pace for like 40 some odd catches. Like that's great. You know, if he does what he's capable of doing as a rusher. The thing that I come back to with Hampton is I think there's a similar type of way they get their fantasy points to what James Cook is going to do, because it's going to be
Touchdown.
limited work in the passing game, hopefully a lot of touchdowns, chance to be the lead runner on what should be a good offense, especially good running offense. And so that's where I kind of come out on them. And I like Hampton as a talent at this point better than Cook, because I'm still a little concerned about the missed practice time. So I just moved Hampton ahead of Cook. I think you're there as well. So
I am.
For me, it's round 3, but I can't fight you if somebody wants him end of round 2 because of those running backs. So I would still take Bucky over him. I still take Taylor over him. I still take Kyron over him, but that next group of guys. But talk to me about Keon Coleman and Tyler Warren, because you've been very excited about these guys almost the entirety of the preseason. And Coleman's been one of the biggest risers. I think everybody looks at it and says, okay, you hear what's coming out of Buffalo. He's graduated he's got his diploma. He's no longer a sleeper. He's now a breakout. Everybody's looking at him as taking the next step forward. So Coleman and Warren are going to be 2 guys that you're targeting a lot.
I couldn't believe that Keon Coleman's average draft position across every site, ours, ESPN, Yahoo, Fantasy Pros. Fantasy Pros does a 24-hour ADP, round 10 plus. And so I made him, I agree he's more of a breakout than a sleeper, but I'm calling him a sleeper anyway. I don't care what you call him. He just draft him. He's the drumbeat from the reporters out in Buffalo has been strong on Keon Coleman since late July. Getting the chance to see him practice was eye-opening because he was moving a lot better than I remembered seeing him move, A, last year, and B, at Florida State. And I asked Joe Brady, did he trim down a little bit? And the answer was yes. He also said that he was very focused on improving his route running. It's clear. And he's not just an X receiver anymore, guys. They use him in the slot. They use him out wide. He was beating everybody in Chicago. The only time he was losing in practice was when he slipped on a route or when Josh Allen was off target. And I caught Josh Allen on an off day in his joint practice against Chicago, but I don't think he's going to have very many of those. I think Buffalo wants to find solutions for beating zone coverage, and they see a lot of that. And I think Keon Coleman is one of those guys who can do it. His metrics from last year were way better in zone coverage than against man coverage, which is surprising for a guy as big as he is. And he's not the fastest guy. He will not outrun a lot of defensive backs, but I think they're going to scheme him up, be their number 1 receiver in their offense. And I've totally bought in. If you can get him in round 10 or later, you're committing a crime against the rest of your league and you should be arrested. But I would take him in round 7. I think he absolutely deserves that kind of consideration. And there was one beat reporter out of Buffalo who's watched him practice all year, and he predicts that he'll have over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. And that even opened my eyes. I was like, wow, that would be amazing. But I think Keon Coleman does have the chance to do that. And, it wasn't long ago when Josh Allen had a number 1 wide receiver who he did pepper with a lot of targets. And it was Stephon Diggs, and Diggs is better. But we do know that Josh Allen is capable of throwing more to one guy than other guys. And I think Keon Coleman could be that guy this year.
He is. I'm not sure if he's allowed to in the Joe Brady offense is my biggest concern. Nobody in this offense last year had more than 100 targets. They had 495 targets as a team. And I love the idea of Keon Coleman as a sleeper. The idea of Keon Coleman in round 7 or even round 8 is pretty terrifying to me, just partially because of the offense that he's in, partially because I don't think Khalil Shakir is going to miss the year. He's still, in my opinion, profiles as a better target earner than Keon Coleman. And partially because, and this does still matter, I mean, he's only played 13 NFL games. While Keon Coleman was a good prospect, he never had 60 catches or 800 yards receiving in college. I think if he has a breakout year, it's going to be like a James Jones, he scores 10 touchdowns on 900 receiving yards type deal. And I'm not sure that's worth a whole lot more than round 7 in the first place. So I think that round 7's way, way, way too close to Keon Coleman's upside. And which is probably a number 3 wide receiver.
And we got a question in regards to, you didn't mention his name, Heath, but who's the better breakout candidate in Buffalo? Is it Keon Coleman or is it Dalton Kincaid, who's also a guy that's gotten rave reviews this offseason as well? Dave, I'm going to skip over Tyler Warren because I'm going to tease that we have a show coming up at 1 o'clock Eastern where you have a fun, bold prediction on Tyler Warren. So if you want to hear more on Warren, not that Dave hasn't talked about him a lot on this show.
It's the same one I've been giving since July.
Right. But check out our Fantasy Football Today show on CBS Sports Network at 1 p.m. Eastern. I also want to mention, Adam wanted me to bring this up. I'm sorry for waiting this long. So hopefully everybody's been listening. But He's going to be making the leftover league selections today or tonight, and the draft will be Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, which would be August 26th. So tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern. So if you cannot participate in the draft and Adam does select you, please let somebody else do that, or maybe suggest somebody else who could take your spot. But he's going to do that. And then once that draft is done, I'm going to make my leftover league selections. Why do I keep saying selections as well, and that draft will probably happen either later this week or early next week prior to the start of the season. I have not finalized how many leagues I'm going to do. Last year we did 3. We'll see if we can do 3 again. All right, Heath, your 3 risers are Evan Ingram, Trevion Henderson, and Teteroa McMillan. Tell us why.
So Evan Ingram, unfortunately, I've probably just risen him up to where everybody else had him before, and now everybody else is rising him higher. But I think he's into that borderline top 12 range for me. And I do think the Vele trade mattered. They have some similar tendencies in terms of where they work on the field. And I think it's a signal that while Sean Payton's offense for the last 5 to 10 years has not generally involved tight ends very much, we're going to see even more from Ingram. He's earning rave reviews at camp. I still think the combination of his age and his historically inefficient production means that you're not going to see a great season from Evan Ingram, but I'm more interested in him in that we've talked a lot about Zach Ertz as an old tight end who you can pair up with one of the young guys, maybe start the old guy early in the year and then move to the young guy. That's where I'm at on Evan Ingram now.
Henderson is somebody you said you have caught up to, I guess, where everybody else has moved him to. I know you're.
I think I've surpassed everyone. Or if you guys, Henderson, if you guys, I don't know how many of you have him in round 3, but I've definitely got him in round 3 now. That few players have been more exciting on opportunities than what Trevion Henderson has. He's everything that I thought that he was. He's better at some of the boring stuff that often keeps rookies off the field than Ramondre Stevenson is. I've got him projected for 64 catches. I've got him in round 3 on basically 10 carries a game. And we've seen Patriots running backs in the Josh McDaniels system produce as top 12 backs without a heavy workload in the running game. The thing I would say is I don't think round 3 is close to Trevion Henderson's upside. If he does what he can do as a rusher and Ramondre Stevenson disappoints even a little bit, we could get 12 to 15 carries a game and 60 plus catches. And Trevion Henderson could be just behind Jahmyr Gibbs.
There was a story in The Athletic, and it was just at least it read to me as an opinion column. There were some quotes in there, but more on what the role that Henderson could play. I think the headline was Henderson is better than I expected or something like that. And I forget the writer, so I apologize. But the story said, I quote tweeted it this morning, that thought that it would be Stevenson getting the majority of carries and Henderson working on passing downs. And that Henderson now has looked so good that he would be surprised if he's not just dominating everything on passing downs and taking at least half of the rushing downs work. Stevenson's already been banged up in camp. We know about the fumble history for him. It just feels as if like there is superstar written all over Trevion Henderson. Yes. And my son, who Heath coaches, my son Ronan, who's 13, he had his father-son. We had our father-son draft last night, but this is the first year where we basically turned it over to the kids. Now, we did give them the option to have 3 lifelines, so they could call older brothers that weren't there, siblings that weren't there, aunts, uncles, whatever.
Dads who are fantasy football analysts.
A few of the kids asked me in the room because they didn't trust their own parents for my advice. And so it came back to Ronan had the 12th pick. He started with Derrick Henry and Brian Thomas Jr. And it came back to the 3-4 turn. And he was staring at Hampton, Henderson. This is my rankings, by the way. He's using my rankings. Hampton, Henderson, and George Kittle. So he used his first lifeline there. And I said to him, like, listen, Kittle's got the ability to just shatter the position because the other 2 guys were gone, so he's going to be one of the top 3 guys, whatever. And I said, I didn't think both guys would get back to you. So that's a gift, to take those 2 running backs.
Yes.
And he's like, I'm going to take the tight end. So he took Hampton and Kittle, but I was like, do I want to tell him how much I just love Trevion Henderson too? Like it was a tough call. So Heath, during practice, if Henderson is outperforming Hampton, you could needle him about that a little bit. But
I'll just tell him he should have used my rankings instead of his dad's.
Should have used your rank. Yep, there you go. And then McMillan, another rookie that he drafted McMillan too, so he got McMillan on his roster also. So any concern over McMillan dealing with the injury right now, hamstring injury?
I mean, you don't like it, But if we're talking about the entire preseason and not the last week, and walking into the preseason, I thought, he's going to be a good player in the NFL, but it might take him a little bit of time to be the clear number one alpha. And everything throughout camp has looked like he's the clear number one alpha. They're trying to trade the most annoying wide receiver in Carolina. No offense, Adam Thielen. He's an awesome player, but we don't want him to earn the targets he's earned in the past. And so hopefully the hamstring's not that big a deal, but McMillan has been one of my biggest risers at wide receiver.
I will say that if Thielen is traded, one of my biggest risers will be Jalen Coker. I mean, just the opportunity that it would open up for him, a guy that would be in that Marvin Mims, Rashid Shaheed range, just to how much Bryce Young likes him. Somebody you could take as early as round 10, but he's not a bad late round flyer at this point. Anyway, remember Thielen missed 7 weeks last season with a hamstring injury. So even with the addition of McMillan, Coker could still be somebody that maybe outperforms Xavier Legette just based on how things go. I'll go through my risers quickly because it's, want to get to Heath's followers, but Isaiah Pacheco, Mike Evans, Matthew Golden. It's hard not to look at Pacheco at this point and say he's the guy again. And he's looking like he's strong, running the ball. Offensive line looks great for the Chiefs. And you're looking at right now, maybe Brashard Smith is the number 2 running back there. And I don't think he's going to steal a lot of work on rushing downs. We'll see about Kareem Hunt and what he does maybe at the goal line. So it could still be messy, but at least based on where pre-camp versus where he is now, where there was some questions about what Elijah Mitchell could do, what is Kareem Hunt's role going to be for even a 30-year-old running back? Smith maybe, coming in and being the next Pacheco as a late round pick that could do some damage, and what's Pacheco's health. But I moved him into the top 24. He's a guy that I'm comfortable taking in round 5. He's a guy that I'm comfortable taking as a round 2 running back, and just excited about Isaiah Pacheco. So this was really more to make Adam happy because he loves Isaiah Pacheco. Mike Evans, me, I love older receivers, but the longer Chris Godwin remains out, it's hard not to look at Mike Evans and say, why would I not take him ahead of Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams at this point, knowing that Adams has still maybe a quarterback that could have a back injury linger at some point, and Tyreek Hill's situation with the oblique, and who knows what this Dolphins offense could look like. Offensive line looks like a mess. So in terms of the 3 older receivers, I started putting Evans in that range with those guys in the middle of round 3, and now Evans is ahead of those 3. So he's been a rapid riser for me, somebody that I was almost not drafting, and now somebody that I'm excited to draft. And it's hard not to look at Matthew Golden and say he's the best receiver for the Packers. And talking about not to the same extent of Emeka Buka and Ricky Pearsall in terms of like round 6, but he's basically in round 6 for me at this point. Like I'll take the upside of what he could be, especially with looking at Jaden Reed still dealing with his foot injury. We don't know when he's going to be back and 100%. And Romeo Doubs, I think, is a good player, just not a very exciting player, especially for an offense that just invested a first-round pick in Matthew Golden. So I think the upside is worth it and somebody that I want to target. So Pacheco, Evans, and Golden. He's got to run. So let's get to the fallers here and start with his 3 fallers here. Devon Achane, JK Dobbins, and Garrett Wilson. Heath, just again, touch on Achane with the calf injury. Mike McDaniel said could practice prior to week 1, but obviously we still don't know when he will be back on the field.
Yeah, I was the high guy on Achane all summer, and I might still be because I think everybody's dropped him a little bit, but he was my number 2 running back. He's now my number 6 running back. He was an easy first-round pick for me before. He's now an early round 2 pick for me before. The only thing I don't like about that is now I have to make a decision early in round 2 between Achane and Brock Bowers, and I want both of them on my team. If Achane gets back at practice this week and seems fine, then by the time we get to this weekend, I'll have Achane in round 1 again. But I wouldn't draft a running back with a calf injury in round 1.
Dobbins, you talked about just still having a role, but why is he falling?
Just because I kind of expected that early in the year, Dobbins would play more snaps than RJ Harvey. And then RJ Harvey might eventually overtake him if he was as good as his backers think he is. And it seems like Sean Payton's one of his backers, and Dobbins may play a secondary role to Harvey early in the year.
It's still possible that could happen, though. It's still possible that Dobbins, I think it's definite that he's going to play on 3rd downs. And it's still possible that Dobbins takes some rushing work away from Harvey earlier in the year. But Harvey's impressed enough to where I think we kind of fade that idea a little bit.
Let's show Dave's 3 fallers just before Heath goes, and he's got Justin Fields as one of his fallers. Heath has Garrett Wilson as one of his fallers. So is it a concern for the passing game for both of these guys in terms of Fields, obviously? But Wilson, you just don't think he's going to command enough targets, get enough production, Fields struggling. Like you start with Wilson, and then Dave just tie in Justin Fields.
What really went wrong for me was not so much like I don't care about the clips of Justin Fields making bad throws at training camp or in preseason games. He's shown me enough in the last 3 years that he's not going to be a good passer. I don't think he's going to be one of the 5 worst passers in the league. But the problem is the math. If they don't drastically increase the number of pass attempts that Justin Fields throws in a game, and nothing's happened this preseason to make me think they are going to. His 17-game pace as a starter over his career is like 430 pass attempts for a year. Even if you bump that up to like 480, still Garrett Wilson at a 28-29% target share, which would be his career high, is going to have a hard time earning 170 targets. And I think the type of efficiency you need to be a round 3 pick on throws from Justin Fields is not what Garrett Wilson has shown us in his career. And he's played with some bad quarterbacks, but even last year playing with Aaron Rodgers, we didn't see a big spike in efficiency, 7.2 yards per target. If he gets 140 targets at 7.2 yards per target, we're looking at a 1,000-yard season, like 1,008 yards. That's not anywhere close to a round 3 pick for a guy that's probably not going to score a lot of receiving touchdowns because most of the Jets' touchdowns will be rushing touchdowns, and they're not going to score that many touchdowns anyway.
I don't think anybody should be drafting round 3. I agree with that. When would you be comfortable taking him, though?
His ADP in CBS is in round 5, and that's exactly where I'd take him.
Yeah, yep. I agree. I think round 5 is a good spot to gamble on him, and hopefully a little bit better production than the math you're giving us, but we'll see how he does. And obviously Justin Fields is going to be a big part of that. Heath, you got to run. We appreciate it. I know I ran a little bit long. I'm going to try
not to hit the wrong button.
Don't end this meeting because we'll be screwed. But Dave, Justin Fields, one of your followers, along with Tyreek Hill and DJ Moore. So just piggyback off of what Heath said about the Jets.
First of all, I moved Garrett Wilson outside of my top 24 in non-PPR. I think that's pretty obvious. I think you need all those catches to have a scintilla's chance of having him as a top 24 wide receiver in full PPR. And so that leaves Justin Fields. If you're drafting him, you're banking on him running a ton. That means you're banking on him playing 17 games. This is a dude who's been hurt when he's been a full-time starter before. This is somebody who might not want to run, and his coaches might not ask him to run a ton when they have 3 other running backs and have spent all offseason talking about 3 other running backs that they want to put the ball in hands of. And it makes me nervous because there's going to be some games where Justin Fields, he does get 100 yards and a touchdown, and then he gets a couple of turnovers throwing the football. He doesn't even get you 20 fantasy points. And then there's going to be weeks where he doesn't get you the rushing yards and he doesn't get you the rushing touchdown, and his passing isn't going to be great. And you're going to lose your fantasy games because Justin Fields scores 7 points for your fantasy team. So I moved him. When I say I moved him down, he got as high as I think 8th for me in my quarterback rankings, and now he's 13th. And so I can find 12 other quarterbacks that I'd rather have. I have had a hard time finding a 13th quarterback that I would rather have than Justin Fields, but he's a move down. He's somebody that I was originally cold on, warmed up to him. And then between just like seeing him throw in the preseason and remembering how bad of a passer he was and knowing how badly the Jets want to run the ball, I've got cold feet. I can't draft Justin Fields as a top 12 quarterback. Tyreek Hill, I've got cold feet on pretty much everybody on the Dolphins, Jamie. I'm nervous about how effective he'll be. I kind of feel like once the Dolphins season falls apart, they'll trade him. And at that point, Tyreek Hill might be awesome. There isn't really a health issue, although he didn't practice against the Jacksonville Jaguars on Thursday, and he hasn't played in the preseason. Tua also has not looked good. The offensive line hasn't looked good. I'm kind of out on Dolphins players as much as I can be, with the exception of Ollie Gordon, because you can get him so late. And DJ Moore I'm out on because I think there's too many other explosive options for Caleb Williams to throw to in Chicago. You mentioned Odunze. He looked great in the preseason game. Man, he looked great against the Bills in their practice. He's looked good all training camp long. DJ Moore was a short area target. And if he's going to continue to be that, then he's going to need huge volume. He had that last year. Remember in the second half of last year, after Shane Waldron got the boot, they started giving DJ Moore a bunch of targets, but his ADOT was 5.7 yards in like his last 8 games. It was good enough for full PPR, but I don't think his target volume is going to be as high this year. So I'm kind of out on DJ Moore too. Tack on that Caleb Williams still hasn't come along as a passer. The offensive line in Chicago isn't great. It makes me nervous to draft DJ Moore. This is the closest I've had DJ Moore to Rome Odunze in my rankings all off season long. I have DJ Moore. This is full PPR at 32 and Odunze at 37. I don't think it's a bad idea at all to pass on DJ Moore in round 6 and get Rome Odunze in late round 6/round 7.
A lot of upside for Odunze, and yes, DJ Moore just feels like was maybe getting just drafted a little bit too high based on his name. We'll see if he can, still be the clear-cut best receiver for Chicago. I think that's going to have to take for him to be a round 4 pick. I would still take him back end of round 5. I have him actually in round 6 at this point. He's part of that big blob of wide receivers from like 20 to 33, 34 of guys that could all be awesome, but start to see some downside there. And one of those guys for me is one of my followers, which is Terry McLaurin. I'm just out. I mean, I think you've heard me say this enough for, weeks now that once the hold-in started, once training camp started, he started to fall for me. He's outside my top 30. He's been there for a few weeks now. I'm just not drafting Terry McLaurin at all because I'll never get him where I have him ranked. Breece Hall is basically the same thing. I still see him in round 3. Look, I hope he's, as Dave alluded to, with the rushing offense for the Jets, that he's the leader of that group. But it just seems as if we're going to see a lot of Breece Hall, potentially Isaiah Davis. I still think Justin Fields is going to have a great season running the ball, which is going to impact Breece Hall as well. And he could be their second best receiver. Wouldn't surprise me if he's second on the team in catches, but will that be even a 50-catch season because of, as Heath told you, the number of pass attempts? They're still going to throw to Josh Reynolds. They'll still throw to Mason Taylor. They're still obviously going to throw to Garrett Wilson. They're going to throw to Isaiah Davis. They're going to throw to Braylon Allen. Like, it's going to be tough, I think, for Breece Hall to maximize his potential given all these other options that the Jets have. Now, if there's an injury to Braylon Allen or maybe Isaiah Davis, that puts Breece Hall, I think, back in the spot that a lot of people are drafting him. I just can't take him at his average draft position and somebody that is outside my top 20 at the running back position. I would rather have Isaiah Pacheco at this point than Breece Hall. And Caleb Johnson, as I told you, I'm nervous about the situation for him. We're going to see the Arthur Smith effect where they're going to use potentially 3 running backs. And he's not going to play a lot on passing downs, at least early in the season. So if Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell stay healthy, for a 40-year-old quarterback, he's going to want those guys protecting him more so. He's going to want Caleb Johnson. And I don't know how many games the Steelers are going to be blowing teams out, maybe against the Bengals where they have a chance to run the ball a lot as opposed to maybe blowing a team out per se, but run the ball a lot, have some success on the ground. Those are the type of games where Caleb Johnson will have some success. He's going to need touchdowns. This feels like it's going to be a trap back. So I don't see myself drafting a lot of Caleb Johnson in redraft leagues. I still think in dynasty formats, long-term keeper leagues, he's got a lot of upside, but got to do a better job in pass protecting. Hopefully that comes as the season goes on.
Jamie, let me ask you one thing on McLaurin. Let's say you wake up tomorrow and he has a new contract with the Commanders.
Not moving him.
Still.
Yep.
I think he would need a extended grace period to be back on the same page as Jaden Daniels, but I think he would be like one of the best steals of the draft if you're getting him where you're drafting him.
But that's the thing. He hasn't moved there. I mean, I've done
it's around 4 ADP still, huh?
I've done 50 drafts, let's just say,
Okay.
Ballpark number, 50 drafts. And in those 50, I haven't seen him pass round 5. So maybe there's been a little bit of a slide into round 5. For the most part, he still goes in round 4. And I think, look, you said it. He's not going to need much. It's not like he joined a new team and
Right.
We're just unhappy with his. It
weeks.
wasn't like George Pickens. He got traded and he's like, I'm not playing until you pay me. He knows this offense. He knows Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels needs him by all accounts from what he said. Cliff Kingsbury wants to see him out there. He's not in game shape. And you go back to last year, Jamar Chase was awesome. Brandon Ayuk was not before he got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
CeeDee Lamb was not the same guy before he got hurt. You go back the year before, the 2 running backs, they were not the same guys from missing practice time. And so I hope McLaurin is going to be fine. I never want to root for injury, obviously, but I just have seen it enough that these guys have some sort of setback. You could, there are a lot of people that will say, oh, he got paid, he doesn't care as much. That's crap. He's going to care as much. He's obviously still around the team. By all accounts, he's been a good teammate. So I just hate the situation. And I'm going to die on this hill with all these guys moving forward when they show up to camp and don't hold out because they want to get fined. And just going to continue to be these type of players wanting to get what they deserve because they deserve it. He's put in his time. He sees the other receivers in his draft class and in his peers getting paid. He should get every dime that he could possibly get. But his fantasy production, I think, is going to suffer as a result of this. And my take is I'm not going to end up drafting him where he goes. I would love to have Terry McLaurin's production. And let's just remove the contract stuff. Just forget. He's been on the field doing everything he's supposed to do. The only thing that changed for him last year, his touchdowns spiked. Yes. Better quarterback play. Yes. Better system.
Yes.
He's a 30-year-old receiver that just saw a huge spike in touchdowns while his targets, catches, yards almost were identical to exactly what they were for the last 4 seasons. So for 5 years in a row, everything else was the same except his touchdowns. It still would make me nervous. I wouldn't be running away from him, but it would make me nervous. So I hope McLaurin shows, like you said, wakes up tomorrow. We find out today he gets paid. I'm just probably not going to draft him based on what his cost will be. I think that would actually put him going back the other way, and we see him maybe in that round 3, round 4.
Yeah, and that would be too high too. Yeah, I'm good with mid to late round 5 now, but there's obvious risk because what if the hold-in extends into the season? Then you might not even see him play until November, and that would suck.
All right, we'll have more news for you as the week goes on. We're going to be on CBS Sports Network at 1:00 Eastern today. We have a lot of shows coming up this week. A lot of drafts coming up this week. Again, our podcast league draft is tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. Adam will be selecting the participants for the Leftovers League, the first one, which will be Tuesday at 8:00 Eastern as well. So keep an eye out with your emails. Continue to send us your entries. I'm sure Adam's going through them on his vacation. And I will start to go through them as well for the leftover leagues that I will be running later this week. For Heath Cummings, for Dave Richard, for Thomas Schaefer, and Carson Wentz, I'm Jamie Eisenberg. Thanks for watching and listening to Fantasy Football Today.